Hello, and welcome to Now Where Were We? A series of short videos about the history of Olympia, Lacey, and surrounding areas. Your host for this program is Deborah Ross. In this series, Deb takes us to locations that inform us about the history of our community. She also visits with local historians. We welcome your feedback and suggestions.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Now Where Were We? An ongoing series of short videos about the history of Lacey, Olympia, and surrounding areas. I'm Deborah Ross, and this is the next installment of what I'm calling our series of iconic intersections that speak to some theme in our history. And today, the theme is From Prairies to Panorama. Many newcomers to our area, and even old-timers, don't realize that in among the forests of the Puget Sound area were vast stretches of prairie land. These prairies were created 15,000 years ago after the retreat of the glaciers from the Ice Age, and they were inhabited by Native Americans for thousands of years. Native Americans kept the prairies from being forested by periodic burning, and they grew plants and harvested them from the prairies, including the beautiful purple camas that still blooms in early spring on the prairies of South Puget Sound. The ecosystem is one of the rarest in the entire country for its array of flora and fauna. Only patches of the original prairie still exist now and are being assiduously maintained by conservationists to preserve what's left of the original prairie system. In the late 1840s, the first Americans arrived to the prairies of South Puget Sound, and among them was the extended Chambers family. The Chambers settled in a large area of prairie just east of Olympia, in what is now Lacey, where we are today. And the prairie was named after them, Chambers Prairie. One of the many children of the Chambers family, David Chambers, had his homestead right here where I'm standing. He settled here in 1852, and in 1853 he brought a black heart cherry tree to his homestead and planted it in the fall of 1854. The tree was beloved by members of the Chambers family, and there are several photographs still in existence of family members gathered around the tree. Let's now take a stroll to the Chambers homestead, where we're going to meet with panorama historian Berta Kazmar, who will tell us a little bit more about the evolution of the property we're standing on now between the time that the Chambers family lived here and its current use as the campus of Panorama. Well, I'm here at the David Chambers homestead with Berta Kazmar, Panorama's unofficial historian. Behind me are the remnants of the original homestead that were preserved when the current chalet building was built. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on this episode of Now Where Were We, Berta?
Oh, well, you're welcome, Deb.
Well, I'm really looking forward to hearing the story about how the homestead then eventually ended up being Panorama and what happened after that. But let's find a more comfortable spot in the lobby of the chalet where we can sit and chat a little bit, if it's all right with you. Okay. All right. Well, now we are comfortably seated in the lobby of the chalet, just around the corner from the installation of the Chambers family homestead that we were meeting at a few moments ago. And again, Great to have you here, Berta. Now, you are the author of the historic document that you're holding here, and tell me a little bit about how that document came about.
This is the book that I compiled that is the history of Panorama for the first 50 years. And I did this because I could not find any history compilation anywhere. And so I went ahead and did it. It took a long time, but it did it.
Well, now, we had talked a little bit before we met you about the Chambers family and the Native Americans who lived here on the prairie even before them, and I'd like you to take me then through the history of what happened between the time of the Chambers family and when this became Panorama. And I understand this was for a long time a golf club.
It was, and the Chambers property was sold to the Olympic Golf and Country Club. And the Chambers home became the clubhouse for the golf course. And they added some additions to it for the clubhouse. The Artibus Corporation in 1956, that's a real estate development company, and they purchased the Mountain View Golf Club at that time. But the golf continued until 1962.
Are there any remnants of the golf course or golf club left on campus?
As far as I know, there aren't. In McGandy Park, there are a few holes where people can go out and putt around, but I don't know if that's part of the original or not. I don't know.
So who was responsible for having the idea of building Panorama here?
Okay, that was Mo Lovelace, and he got this idea that he should build a continuing care community. And at that time, most of them were just high-rises, and he wanted it to be a community where you would have continuing care through phases of your life.
And so was it contemplated at the very beginning that everybody would have their own home and then be able gradually to move on as their needs increased?
That was definitely part of it. The first home was built in 1962, and that was near the entrance to Panorama. And it was to be the model home, but it became the office for Panorama Corporation. And that was in 1962, and then in 1963, the first people moved in, the McGandys. That's where you get McGandy Park. He started the CNR in 1963 as the first building, which you wouldn't think he would, but there were houses that were going to be built by this corporation, and he wanted to have the CNR. That, to him, that was one of the most important things. And then he started Pan Hall in 1965 because he felt like the people in the homes needed a gathering place to get together. And so that was the next big building here at Panorama. The building was not completed when it became time for Christmas, and so they put planks on sawhorses, the residents did, and brought their own food for potluck for a Christmas dinner, and that was the very first dinner in Pan Hall. And the original Chambers home, the golf course clubhouse, was burned to make room for this building, the chalet. And it was completed in 1968. And this was Mo's love, this building. And he made it in sections. And at one point, he was just very upset because he didn't have enough money to continue. But he finally managed to do it. And in the last 2 years of his life, he moved in to the chalet. And this is where he was for his final 2 years.
So the chalet itself is a historic building in the history of Panorama and Lacey.
It is. It actually is.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to sit with me and tell me about the history of Panorama. And I do highly recommend the book and that you pick it up either at Gifts Etc. or at the warehouse or at the library and take a look through. It is well worth it, particularly for people who love history like we do. And thanks so much for keeping it alive, Berta.
You're most welcome.